You're listening to Scary Sleep Stories presents The Dark Hours.
Welcome, guys. I know a lot of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before you drift off like the video, subscribe if you're new, and comment what time it is right now. Let's see who's still awake and who's not alone tonight. Let's begin. Story 1. The Portrait Room. The train squealed into Kestrel Falls with a confession of brakes and a sigh of hot metal. Vera was the only one to step off. Suitcase in hand, heels clicking along the half-ruined platform. She drew the thick autumn wind into her lungs and tried to steady the tremor in her chest. This was supposed to be her reset after the breakdown, after her failed engagement, after whispering, "I'm not myself anymore," to a string of therapists and watching them fill a prescription pad instead of the silence. Her mother's cousin had left her a house outside this dying town. A village of shuttered shops and copper leaves where the fog came early and the light departed quick. The house, Claudia's letter claimed, was a retreat, ideal for creative work and rest. Vera clung to that, tugging her case through ankle-deep wet grass, as if promise alone could repair her life. The house was neither a cottage nor a mansion, perched on a slope over the weedy border of an abandoned orchard. Built in 1929, it had been added onto by dreamers and eccentrics, its hallways crooked and lined with pale wallpaper, the ceilings dappled by sunlight that never quite reached the corners. A handful of antique mirrors hung in the corridor, each angled as if to catch someone leaving or arriving too quietly. She settled in that first week, making routines of chores and walks, though the isolation scraped at her. There were no neighbors for a mile, only wild turkeys and the faint echo of fox calls at midnight. Vera was surrounded by portraits, her ancestors pressed in oils and dry pastels, most unsigned, the faces distant, the eyes often turned away. She tried to ignore their presence, keeping her gaze on her laptop's glare or the garden's thorn of sparrows. Each night she moved through a pattern, the same circuit from the old wood stove to her bedroom. The little cup of tea sipped slowly, a duplicate glance at her own reflection. It was a fragile piece. On the 7th night, she found the first note, tucked behind a book of poetry, a slip of thick, off-white paper. In a copper-plate hand it read, "Do not sleep in the portrait room." Vera hesitated a prank left by Claudia. She wandered the house with her phone's flashlight and found the portrait room by process of elimination. It was a forgotten parlor. Velvet drapes, 4 walls-covered ceiling, to baseboard with portraits, their backs marked property of the Rains family. In the center, a narrow daybed. Shrugging aside a shiver, Vera shut the door. "I won't," she whispered to the empty hallway. Sleep, that night, was restless. The wind battered the panes until midnight. Then everything stilled. In the faint glow of streetlight, she could almost hear footsteps in the upstairs corridor, a brush of fabric on wallpaper. Not voices, exactly more the sensation of someone speaking behind a wall of water. She woke to find her bedroom mirror fogged from the inside, her breath frosting there even as the room remained warm. The days blurred together. Vera fell into a bizarre intimacy with the house. She found more notes folded inside an old scarf in the closet, locked the mirrors if the wind rises, slipped between the pages of a gardening manual. Don't answer if they call the names you've forgotten. Her mood began swinging from hope to apprehension. She would pace the house rehearsing excuses for leaving, her mind always circling back to the same question. Leave for what? Who would notice her absence? On the 3rd Friday, she heard what sounded like a voice as she showered, clear, cold, precise. "Vera, come to the portrait room." Her heart clenched. The voice was like her mother's from years ago, weary and demanding. She pulled on clothes, hands shaking, and made her way to the parlor. The room was colder than the rest of the house. The portraits pressed close dozens of faces, some familiar, many not, each eye seeming to follow as she drew the curtains back. The mirrors on the far wall were uncovered. She caught a glimpse of herself, but the reflection twitched, lagged a beat behind her movement, then grinned when Vera's own face did not. She stumbled back, shutting the door fast enough to make the frame rattle. The voice faded, replaced by a low hum, as if the house itself had been waiting for her to notice. That night, no matter how she tried, Vera could not avoid sleep. She woke, at least. She thought she woke in complete darkness. Slowly, her eyes adjusted, She was in the portrait room, but in this version, everything pulsed with subdued light. The gold in the frames glimmered, dust floated sideways. A woman's outline blurred near the window. She moved with a strange stiffness, as though joints and skin were only approximations. "Vera," the voice came from all around. "You look just like your grandfather, so full of questions, so sure you're not like the rest of us." Panic clawed at her chest. "Who are you?" The figure smiled. "I'm the memory of this house, and you're the part of you that never leaves." Vera tried to run, but her limbs dragged as if she were moving in syrup. The portraits leaned out of their frames, eyes unblinking, mouths opening and closing. Some called her name, some pleaded, some simply stared, waiting. She awoke tangled in her bedsheets, heart pummeling her ribs. She resolved to spend the day outdoors, walking the orchard's edge, except every path led her back to the house, no matter how far she went. Each day after, Vera found the boundaries of the house shifting. The mirrors reflected her with half a second's delay. If she watched too closely, her other self turned away. Shadows collected in the corners. The portrait's eyes seemed wetter, more expectant. The notes grew more desperate. "Don't look at the painting at dawn. If you see yourself bleeding, hide. Stop writing in the journal." She ripped up the newest message and hurled it into the wood stove. As the paper curled to black, she heard her own voice behind her, reciting lines from her journal she'd never spoken aloud. A deep paranoia crept in. She phoned her old therapist, left rambling messages about déjà vu and time loops, but the calls never connected. One night she woke to find she'd been painting with her left hand, something she'd never done. A portrait was nearly complete, a woman with her own face, staring back with eyes twice as large, smile split by a shadow. She threw it into the cellar, but dreamt of it anyway. Her painted self, wandering the orchard by moonlight. Weeks blurred. Vera felt pressed into a tunnel of memory, forced to relive her worst moments on mute, audience to betrayals she'd tried to bury. At the border of sleep, the woman in the window beckoned. On the 36th day, Vera reached a breaking point. She found herself in the portrait room, daylight burning at the windows, her reflections split across a dozen frames. She screamed wordless, desperate a sound only the old house seemed to hear. The mirrors warped, her face flickering between fury, terror, and joy. The portraits began to chant softly, "Vera, Vera, Vera." The woman in the window, no longer a hazy outline, stepped into the room and embraced her. Vera's breath fogged the glass frames. Her flesh tingled, as if dissolving, each boundary between self and other giving way. "You can leave," the woman whispered, "but you must leave something behind." Vera asked, "What will I remember?" The woman smiled, "Only what you're willing to forget." Vera slashed her palm with a shard of broken mirror. She pressed her bleeding hand to the largest portrait's canvas and watched the red fade into oil. In seconds, the room froze. The portrait silenced. The woman at the window wept. Vera collapsed to the floor, her vision flickering between the room and a new place, a hospital room. Strangers huddled at the doorway, a nurse charting another name. Late that night, Vera awoke in her own bed, the house silent. The notes were gone, the mirror still. She peered into the nearest one. Her own face, older now, uncertain, but smiling at last, not in malice, but in recognition. She packed. She left. She did not look back. But sometimes, in new apartments with plain white walls, in rental mirrors fogged with steam, she glimpses the woman at the window. The voices of the house have faded, but the echo remains. The price of returning from the portrait room is carrying its memory forever. Story 2. The Orchard Keeper. In a remote village, cradled between fog-swamped hills and dense, ivy-choked woods, there lay an ancient orchard known as Black Hollow. For countless generations, the orchard had been tended by one family, the Andersons, reputed guardians of the land, custodians of the trees, and whisperers of secrets that time itself tried to swallow. The current caretaker was Thomas Anderson, a solitary figure both revered and quietly feared by the villagers. To many, Thomas seemed almost an extension of the Black Hollow itself, tall, hollow, cheeked, moving with a deliberate grace, his gray eyes echoing the somber palette of the orchard in late autumn. The air around him vibrated with something, an unspoken understanding, weighty as ancient stones. The orchard he loved and labored over held gnarled apple trees, roots corkscrewing so deep it was said you could hear the heartbeat of the earth through your feet if you stood still enough. Every autumn, rich crimson apples, smooth as glass and slightly luminescent, hung on these branches. No one in the village dared eat them, for stories warned that a single bite led to visions, madness, or worse. Every fall, Thomas shipped the harvest to distant cities, discreet crates exchanged in the dead of night for untraceable funds. Only a select, secretive, few iconoclast scholars, hidden society patrons, paid for a taste of the fruit, drawn by the rumors that Black Hollow apples revealed the true self, all hidden memories and every shadow in the soul. The rhythm of Thomas's life was disturbed that October by the arrival of Evelyn Collier, a botanist chasing rumors. She was young, field-hardened, and skeptical, her notebook filled with neatly sedging, drawn diagrams, and ink-stained thumbprints. She arrived alone, her car packed with measuring tapes and pH meters, dismissing the tales of haunted trees told by the local barmaid. Thomas observed her warily as she moved among the ancient trunks, carefully sampling the soil, sniffing at the leaves, sketching a cross-section of a fallen apple with precise, clinical detachment. Still, he found himself drawn to her curiosity. Against his instincts, he welcomed her, answering her questions with cryptic hedges, occasionally revealing a scrap of forgotten folklore. Days turned into nights packed with questions and cigarettes beneath the shroud of gnarly branches, the moonlight broken into ribbons by swaying limbs overhead. Evelyn methodically logged the weather, the sap flow, and even the behavior of bats who roosted in hollows. In her diary, she admitted feeling as though the trees watched her, leaning in to eavesdrop. Sometimes she found bruises on her arms where no branches had touched her, or she'd awake from a nap beneath the orchard with the sour taste of apples in her mouth and the rustle of hushed voices lingering in her ears. One afternoon, Thomas led her to the heart of the orchard, a ring of trees older and darker than the rest. Here, the ground was soft as a grave. He knelt and pressed his palm to the soil. "This orchard isn't just alive," he whispered. "It is awake. Every root and branch belongs to my ancestors, their souls twisted in the trees. I am the keeper, but I am also the ward." Evelyn found herself unable to laugh. Her science rebelled, but something primal inside her recoiled from this truth. That night, Evelyn's dreams filled with distorted faces pressing from beneath bark. Shadows moved among the orchard rows, carrying burdens she could not see. In the morning, she found a necklace of apple seeds braided with black hair at her door. Attached was a note: "Every blessing is also a curse." When Thomas vanished one dawn, panic flickered through her. She wandered through the twisting rows, every path looping back to the center. In a sunken grove, she discovered the trees blackened, their fruit shriveled. Here, a chill soaked through her bones. Shadows began to gather, spectral figures, all with the Andersons' high cheekbones and haunted eyes. "We are bound to the root," they intoned, "to the blood and fruit. Escape is a lie." Their gazes pierced. "Tend or perish." Evelyn ran, heart slamming, branches whipping at her face and legs. The orchard seemed endless. When at last she stumbled free, it was dusk, the sun a dying ember over the hills. The village was empty, windows shuttered, doors locked, fires dead. It was as if the world held its breath. She scoured the town records, the dusty church ledgers, the faded letters stuck behind wallpaper in the vicarage. Each document traced cycles of disappearance, how each Anderson was chosen, how the orchard demanded a keeper and the village demanded the orchard stay placated. Deserters faced ruin. Those who resisted the call of bloodline returned, changed, or not at all. A week passed. Evelyn resolved to leave, but every attempt to depart was confounded by circumstance. Her car wouldn't start. The road washed out. The phone's dead. Each night she saw Thomas at the orchard's edge, lips moving in silent prayer, eyes wet. On the seventh night, she returned to Black Hollow, drawn by dreams of whispered names and the cold weight of the necklace at her throat. In the oldest part of the orchard, A new altar had been raised, rough stones stacked in a ring, crimson apples piled around a gnarled root. The air here pulsed with 1,000 quiet laments. The spectral keepers emerged once more. "Choose," they whispered. "Tend the orchard, or join the forgotten dead." Evelyn, trembling, picked up the ceremonial knife lying at the altar's heart. She pressed its edge gently to her palm. As blood welled up and dripped into the earth, lightning flickered overhead. The roots at her feet writhed, hungry. Shadows pressed closer. Her memories, fractured scenes of ancestors wailing, children's laughter buried. Each keeper, transformed into the roots, their love for the orchard indistinguishable from terror. "I accept," Evelyn said, "but I will not vanish into your silence." The orchard shuddered. She fell, consciousness dissolving in the loam and memory. When she awoke, the shadows were gone. The orchard was calm, as if relieved. In the village, light returned to windows. People emerged to sweep leaves from steps and light lanterns for the autumn festivals. Yet Evelyn understood they were only actors in a play the orchard directed. Celebrations, staged to conceal 1,000 years of sacrifice. She tended the trees through winter. Her research notes grew erratic. Botanical reports gave way to poetry and laments, sketches of faces twisted with longing, apples blushing with captured sorrow. On bitter nights, she heard Thomas's voice calling her name from the frost-locked groves, begging forgiveness. She did not answer. With spring's thaw came new growth. The trees flowered with impossible brilliance, humming with life and promise. Evelyn hosted festivals, opened parts of the orchard to children, and spread the tale of Black Hollow as one of mystery and bounty. But beneath her calm, she ached with the knowledge of the cost. Every apple gleamed with the soul of the lost, every blossom brushed by forgotten hands. The villagers watched her with hope and fear, never knowing what would happen if she left, or simply failed to care. But each knew the simplest rule: respect what roots itself deeper than memory. Evelyn took lovers, traveled for short stretches, but always found herself drawn back. The orchard's call was velvet soft, inexorable. Its needs defined her days. At the orchard's center, a new stone bore her name, the next, in an unbroken line. Sometimes, she told herself the stories were only stories, that blood was just another kind of sap. Other times she wept, knowing her eventual place among the trees. And each autumn, as crimson apples swelled on twisted boughs, Evelyn watched strangers arrive, drawn by rumors of wisdom and beauty. She warned them with a smile shadowed by grief. Every blessing is also a curse. Every harvest must be paid for. At sundown, shadows lengthen. The wind shakes the branches, and if you listen closely beneath murmur of the leaves, you may catch the orchard keepers calling past, present, and future bound, together in roots that hold the world in silent, loving captivity. Story 3. The Silent Patient. Ava Everly was once the name on every gallery's lips. Critics called her portraits revelations, raw, churning things that made viewers squirm. Each painting radiated a peculiar tension, as if the canvas might confess something unspeakable at any moment. Yet the closer Ava moved toward fame, the further she seemed to slip from herself. The truth is, she was famous for a wound she never let heal. The incident no one truly understood, or that Ava herself would ever explain, happened in Paris, 3 years before the silence. On the closing night of her solo exhibition, in a room thick with wine and electric laughter, something snapped. A violent argument, a figure in a black coat, a flash of red on white marble, and then nothing but headlines and speculation. Afterwards, Ava stopped speaking. Not a word, not a gasp for 6 years. Her world became bounded by white walls and scrawled notes, court-mandated therapists, and morning sunlight slanting across unfinished paintings. Reporters made stories of her silence. Followers on social media called it haunting. Some said it was an act. Others whispered a curse. Only her diary held the truth, jagged fragments Ava carefully tore into shreds after every entry. The safest place, she believed, was where even she couldn't reach. In the 7th year of her silence, seeking either peace or obliteration, she left the city. She bought a decaying farmhouse perched on a cliff where the North Sea battered the rocks and the wind keened day and night. The windows were clouded, the roof bowed under centuries of storms. The old floors seemed to tilt, as if the house couldn't quite bear its own secrets. The estate agent gave the usual hedge: old house, odd angles, leaks when it rains, but structurally sound, miss. And this room, he opened the parlor. Best light for painting most days. Ava nodded and signed. She moved in with only canvas, oils, a battered kettle, and silence. The first whisper. On the 2nd or 3rd night she'd stopped counting, Ava woke to the sound of humming. It was a lullaby, sweet and sorrowful, a song her mother used to sing at bedtime, or perhaps only a trick of memory. Wrapped in a blanket, she shuffled through the halls, following the lingering notes to a small door beneath the stairs. Inside sat an old oval mirror, frame crusted with verdigris, glass bruised with age and storm cloud. For a moment, Ava saw not herself, but a girl, hair falling into her eyes, lips penciled blue. The image blinked and was gone the second she gasped a soundless cry. That day, she painted furiously, splintered faces on background after background, each blurring into the next. When she finished, the canvases stared at her, all wrong, all watching. Unraveling, Ava explored the house's winding stairs, cupboards stacked with rusted teapots, attics where gulls had long ago broken through. On one of these searches, she found diary pages, none in her hand, tucked inside a birdcage. A single phrase repeated in looping blue: "The girl who won't speak." Shivers ran down her spine. She burned the pages, watching blue flame lick the words into nothing. Yet that night the lullaby returned, hummed by some presence just outside her bedroom door. She began to keep her own diary again, taping each page behind wall panels, under floorboards, desperate to keep order. Each morning, she'd wake to find some pages gone, or strange lines added in a script she knew but was not her own. They recounted memories, schoolyard, betrayals, hospital, beds, faceless men waiting outside galleries that belonged to her but also felt borrowed. Her paintings changed. She began to paint mirrors, 100 variations, everyone cracked in a new place. Sometimes her own face stared back, sometimes a stranger's, a pale woman with bruised eyes, a smile carved too wide. The house remembers, one storm-shredded night, Ava woke to the cry of gulls. At her door, a soft shadow pressed, as if longing to seep through the gap. She followed it to the parlor, where all her paintings had slid off the walls, faces turned downward as though ashamed. On the parlor table sat the mirror, uncovered now. In it, Ava saw the house behind her reflected infinitely, a dozen versions of herself in each doorway. They wore different clothes, bore different wounds. Some covered their mouths, others pointed accusingly at her. "Tell me the truth," they mouthed over and over, a voiceless plea. Ava fled to the cliff's edge, rain slashing her skin. Staring into the sea, she screamed not aloud, but in her mind, words roaring and tumbling without sound or sense. Thunder cracked. Someone, a shadow of herself, stood beside her and pressed a cold hand to her cheek. "Speak," it whispered, voice soft as a razor. "You cannot heal if you do not name the wound." She sank to her knees, sobbing silently. Descent. The next day brought nothing but fog. Ava's skin prickled. Her breath came short. The house felt tight, pressing inward. She painted frantically, as if to forestall the sense that she was dissolving. A backdrop of swirling grays and greens. A single figure standing inside a mirrored room, trapped, hands pressed to glass, as if begging to break free. At dusk, she made tea and found dirt in the kettle. No matter, she drank 3 cups as the wind battered the shutters. She resolved to write a letter to her sister, or perhaps herself. As pen touched page, she found the ink refusing to flow. Only when the house dimmed into pitch black did Ava succeed. Etching words not in her usual tiny print, but large, desperate strokes. The house remembers. Windows are eyes. Truth is voice. That night, the mirror whispered, "Come." Ava followed, barefoot, cold, painting smears of color across the floors. The shadow waited in the mirror, arms outstretched, eyes burning with tears. Ava watched as it mimed speech, soft, looping motions of the mouth she once knew. The reflection pressed a palm to the glass. Ava pressed hers in return. From the darkness, the first word in 6 years burst free, harsh animal. Why? The mirror spiderwebbed with cracks. The reflection smiled gently, almost lovingly. Because you must. That was when Ava remembered. The night in Paris, the gallery, the man in the black coat, how she fled from something she had witnessed, never spoken. How she kept a secret, let another take the blame, and spent years swallowing her own voice, breaking the silence. The next day, Ava faced her paintings, tore down every canvas, and painted a single colossal portrait, herself unspeaking, eyes wide with regret and hope. It was raw, unfinished, alive. She invited the villagers in for the first show. They gawked at the splinters and storm-touched canvases, murmuring confusion or awe. But Ava felt, finally, relief. That night, she dreamed she could speak, and her words did not destroy. As the weeks passed, the house softened. The cracks in the mirror faded. The diary pages stopped, disappearing. Her own script returned, neat if halting, each sentence a slender admission. Sometimes at dusk, she heard the lullaby in the wind. But when she looked in the mirror now, only her own face peered back, still haunted, still healing. But finally, guilt set aside. Each morning, Ava greeted her home with the same 3 words, her voice a little stronger each day. "I am here," and the walls, in their silence, seemed to answer, "Welcome home." You've been listening to Scary Sleep Stories. May your dreams be calm and nights undisturbed.